All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All right, Assalamu alaikum. We are now officially live. It takes a few minutes to roll over on Facebook, but I do like to take this time to sort of share it on our own pages. So if you have a moment, ladies, and if you know how, go ahead and share the live on your page, if that would be helpful. Assalamu alaikum. As you guys are joining, welcome to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast. We are so happy to see you guys tuning in. Wa alaikum salam, Dawood. How are you? Assalamu alaikum, Saudia. How are you? Please drop your salams and share the podcast. Please drop your salams and share the podcast. I miss you guys. Welcome to the show. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started, mashallah. Welcome to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum, Angela. Assalamu alaikum, Amina. Assalamu alaikum. We are so happy. We are so happy to have all you guys back. To have myself back with all of you guys. It's been a minute. Hey, assalamu alaikum, Kina. We have a very important, near dear topic to my heart. I've been planning this topic for a very long time. Sister Khadijah knows we rescheduled it so many times, but I've been really anxiously. We talked about it, I want to say months ago, even, kind of before this whole, everything happened with George Floyd. This was heavily on our minds because this is the work that we do. But welcome to Black Boys Don't Cry, addressing the school to prison pipeline, talking about some of the unjust penal systems, epidemic of penal related behavior systems that our Black boys are sort of faced with. So welcome, you guys. Welcome for being here. Please interact and talk to us throughout it. Alhamdulillah, like I can now see your comments right beside me on my stream here. I don't have to rely on Veronique. So please comment. I can see you guys as you guys pop up. Assalamu alaikum. Hey, Jan. All right. Alhamdulillah. So I am going to go ahead and get started and introduce our guests. First and foremost, though, I am joined by a new co-host, you guys. MashaAllah. This sister right here, if you guys don't know her, she was a guest on season 1. She gave a fire episode on marriage and keeping your identity throughout marriage and staying in love and all that good stuff. It was very popular. So check it out on season 1. It's under Anchor and it's our audio podcast. But this lovely sister right here, I want to introduce her because she's important. She's a co-host, but she's also sort of a part of important, vital part. She has the expertise here. She's a Georgia certified school counselor. She's also a doctoral student in a counselor education supervision program. She has over 18 years of experience in education and counseling. She's worked with students and families who have experienced trauma, specifically with grief, divorce, abuse, self-harm, and crisis. She focuses on child development, crisis intervention, grief counseling, and so much more. She's really a huge proponent for tapping into the hidden potential of children who are thrown away and often stereotyped. And she is my good colleague, my good friend and colleague, Medina El-Wakil Dawson. Welcome to the show. Thank you for co-hosting with me.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Anytime, Sabria. Anytime.
So happy to have you here, mashallah. And I'm super humbled to be here with our guest, mashallah. She is a longtime friend of mine. She's very special and near and dear to me because both of these ladies work also on our nonprofit Mace Muslim Advocates for Exceptional Children. So we've done work together for years. But this sister, she is a trauma-informed educator and trainer of several years. She's a curriculum developer. She works specifically with underprivileged schools and teachers going into these schools to ensure that there is equity in education. She's extremely passionate about addressing how we teach our young Black children in this public school system. She's worked on the state level to change the way we test and evaluate children that have emotionally are called EBD or emotional behavioral disorders. She is working really hard to establish a more norm evaluation to stop the funneling of our Black boys into special education, especially under this diagnosis of emotionally disturbed. So she is a phenomenal woman. Welcome to the show, Khadijah Abdullah.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Your bios was a lot. Both of y'all bios was a lot. I'm exhausted. MashaAllah. Welcome,
You shortened mine.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum. Hey guys. So alhamdulillah. So we're gonna get right into this topic because it's really important. So we're talking about Black Boys Don't Cry, right? This is, and I was on doing a promo for this on a radio show a little while ago, and he was like, and the brother, he asked me, he said, why are you calling Black Boys Don't Cry? And I'm like, think about it. I know as an educational consultant that when I go into schools, especially with Black boys, they are constantly telling the boys, don't cry, man up, be tough. They could be 4, 5, it doesn't matter, right? So this is a really important conditioning that we want to talk through. So, all right. So Khadijah, I'm going to start real heavy with you, right? So the school to prison pipeline, right? So I'm just going to go over some facts. It indicates that there's a relationship between minority young men who are disciplined in K-12 settings through suspensions and expulsions, and those who end up incarcerated later in life. I want to just start there. Can you speak a little bit about the root of this issue and what does it actually look like today in American K-12 settings, educational settings?
Well, I think to look at the root of the issue, we have to look at the historical system that we live in, right? A system that was not built to support Black boys. It was not built to support or include them, right? I've been doing a lot of work with working through timelines of trauma as it relates to African Americans in this country. And one thing that was very interesting to me, it was over 300 years before, from the start of African Americans being brought to this land to when they had established their rights in this country, right? Between the first time they were brought here as indentured servants to when we were given the Voting Rights Act in 1968. So understanding this over 300 years to establish a stronghold as a citizen in this country. And those were through amendments, right? The original plan was never to include people of color, and especially not African Americans. So after we had established the laws, you had to enact a system that worked for these people, right? That were never included. But we're talking about 55 years here, right? 55 years between when we finally got the right to vote, we were included as whole citizens, to now. And within that time, we have seen an education system that still operates and functions as it did before we were included. Nothing huge has changed, right? So the system was never established to support African Americans. It still is not established. And as we start to notice different things, people then enact laws to change the way it operates, to shift the way it operates. So in a system that works against a culture or works for a specific culture, our system is white. Our system works for white, Christian, male. That's what our system was built for. That's what it works for. And within that system, there's certain cultural norms that are accepted, right? And so that cultural norm is white, Christian, male. So there is an understanding that to function in the system, you have to behave a certain way, right? In the book Stamped, it called it, there's 3 types of racism, or 3 types of three types of systems, right? There's the assimilation system, right? There's the completely racist system, right? And then there's the anti-racist system. Our education system is assimilation system, right? Here is the system, here's the culture, you have to act within this culture. If you are outside of this culture, then you're seen as a danger, as a threat. And so because our African American boys are not white, Christian, and male, in the sense of what male is defined as white in this country, it is against that certain culture. So specifically, how does that work in numbers? Because I'm a numbers person. I look at statistics, I look at numbers, I want to see the data. I'm a very big data person. It's one school system in the state of Georgia that has over 111,000 students. And of those students, 37% are white, 30% are Black, so almost half and half, right? 74% of the teachers in that school system are white. 68% of the administrators or the principals are white, and 70% of the admin, these are the
Like
the ones that work under the principals, right? They are also white. So you have a system that is built for white people, supported by white people, but almost half and half Black and white, right? So what happens within that system, right? You have a cultural norm. 50% of OSSs are Black. That means out of school suspensions, right? 38% of those are expulsions, Black boys. So, and represented, it's underrepresented, right? You have a half and half, but somehow over half of the OSSs and expulsions are towards Black students. Why is that? Now, you have to understand also this system is built on stereotypes and stigmas that were established in the media and the portrayal of males in this country, right? Black men are portrayed as dangerous. They're portrayed as violent. Their behaviors are seen as violent and dangerous. And for example, in my school, I remember talking about why in lower income areas do we have uniforms. In the same school system, we have lower income areas, known as Title I, that are predominantly African American and Hispanic. They have uniforms, whereas you have the schools in the same school system that are predominantly white, predominantly high income, that don't have uniforms, right? Why is that? And the response from a white counselor in the school said, it's because we want to suppress gang violence. This is elementary school, right? Yes, it's gang violence. And I said, where are the gangs? Well, you know, they're going to wear certain colors and they're going to throw up gang signs. Well, if we reduce the amount of colors, I said, they could bring in a bandana in the back pocket if they wanted to represent their gangs. I said, I don't understand where the correlation between their clothing and reducing gang violence. But notice her reaction was, and her immediate answer was, we're reducing gang violence. Why do you think she went to gangs? And it wasn't because it was lower income. It was because we were predominantly Hispanic and African American. And that's the understanding that Black boys are gang members, right? So when they behave a certain way, their behavior is seen as violent. And so the reaction is very punitive and often much more harsh than their white counterparts or their rich counterparts, right? In other school systems. And this data is open to the public. You can go research it if you want to. So you see the schools that are in lower income areas receiving far more harsher punishments for the same types of crimes and you see the same thing in our judicial system. So our school system acts in the same constructs as our judicial system. So there we get the school to prison pipeline, right? You have a system that trains people, right, to go into a certain environment, right? You have predominantly white schools that are trained to go into colleges and careers, whereas you have predominantly lower income and Black and brown students who are trained to go into the justice system, right? Juvenile justice system. That is what the pipeline is. And if you think that it's not real, and I was one of those people that was like, what is this school to prison pipeline? What does that mean? And I got into the system and I was like, wow, this is exactly what it means. You set children up with an understanding that their life and their trajectory goes towards one direction, right? Streets or prison. And this isn't just something that people believe. It's echoed by the teachers. Teachers who say things like it's in their blood, something's wrong with them. These are spoken words by teachers.
All the time. Yep, heard it many times.
Teachers who say things like, there's nothing you can do for them, right? A student who clearly has trauma, who has been through trauma, is seen as a violent offender and is dangerous. So we don't do anything to help them. All we can do is collect the data to send them through the system to get them into EBD, right? Then you get them into places like Haven, which are homes for students with severe behavior disorders. And then where do they end up? Majority of these students end up on drugs in the street and then in the prison system, because that's where their life trajectory started from the beginning. And so the school to prison pipeline is a system that works to make sure students of brown skin and Black students end up in one specific place. And and you have to understand, and I say this when I have conversations with people. People are like, racism is so nuanced now. There's different types of racism. There's malicious racism, where people maliciously believe that you not only don't deserve to live in their area to get the same rights, but they don't believe that you deserve human rights. Then there's cultural racism, right? This is where the culture was built against another culture, right? And that's what we have in our school system. Our school system's culture is built against Black students because the culture is white, rich, Christian male, right? And you behave this way. You code switch. If you behave in an aggressive way, and aggressive is seen as Black norm. A hoodie is seen as aggressive and it's seen as violent. Certain music is seen as violent. And most often that music is attached to Black boys. If you sit in your seat a certain way, that's a sign that and I've had teachers actually say this to me. When they sit that way, it's a sign they're about to get up and beat somebody up. Yeah. I said, are you kidding me?
Right.
They have seen movements, reactions as violent. And the immediate reaction when they get to this point is violence, right? So when we see that, immediately these students are written up. And also there's a visceral reaction from the teachers, right? There's an angry reaction. And I used to ask that some of the teachers that I worked with, and I've asked teachers in my training, why do you get so upset when this behavior presents itself? Why is it personal? Why do you take it personal? And their response was, most often, because I'm afraid. And you have to understand that our system has built a fear of Black boys throughout history, right? When the Emancipation Proclamation came down, what did they do? Started a campaign to make sure you understood that Black boys, Black men especially, were dangerous. And they have been perceived that way in media, in the movies, in the way that they're perceived in magazines, in the music. Everything has been a campaign to vilify Black men and Black boys, right? Yeah. It started from the first movie that was shown in the White House, right? The very first movie was about how Black boys were going to come out and rape white women, right? Mm-hmm. Most often, when boys were put in prison, what was it? Because they were whistling at white women, they had said something to white women, this fear that people have about Black boys. And it is a palpable fear.
Yeah.
And understanding that is why there's such a visceral reaction and there's such a punitive reaction to our Black boys in the school system.
Yeah. I wanted to, Medina, I want to bring you in here. I know we have I'm going to bring this comment in, and then Medina, I'm going to segue you in. But Brother Yusuf, thank you. And I hope I'm saying your name correctly, but thank you for your comment. He said, it's more than anything, once our experts realize what the problem is, it's time to attack it. Cultural curriculum improvement and mentorship programs, supplemental education. The solution for undereducation is sufficiently educating them. Education in prisons has actually shown amazing results, catching them before we have huge effects, but the culture needs education. Thank you for your comment.
More teachers in the school system that look like the students who are in the school system, right? You have schools where majority are Black boys, but majority of the teachers are white. We need more teachers and more administration in the schools to represent the culture that they're teaching, because oftentimes that's what the problem is. The culture.
But they do need to be culturally competent, Khadijah. I do want to add that too, right? Because I work in predominantly Black schools, and I see a lot of the same. I actually was told, just want to say this real quick, I actually was told by a black individual that I thought was, woke, told me, Sabria, listen, you can't help those people. Like, that the way it's just too deep. You can't, because, when you go into these schools, you understand what, a lot of things which you are going to be subject to. They like, look at you, little Sabria, you can't help those people. And I've been told that more by actually Black educators.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean,
I've gotten more pushback from Black educators than I have from white educators, right? I have Black educators who told me, no, the myth of, the myth of majority white in the school system, that's a myth. It's not true. Anybody can work in the school system. I think that, understand, I'm one of those that's not about just putting a brown face in spaces, right? You have to, I think that we as a people have to be understand our own culture too, and understand the cultural bias. But I do understand one thing that I have learned moving down here in the South is that there's an understanding of silence when it comes to our people, right? In certain spaces, there's an understanding that we're supposed to be silent. I can't tell you how many times I've been told the reason why we don't say anything is because I could lose my job. Yeah. There is palpable fear from Black educators that if they say anything and don't follow the status quo, that they will be fired or some type of punitive reaction from their administration. And that's a real thing. So a lot of people have been quiet for a very long time.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you, Khadijah. I'm sorry, Medina. Go ahead, segue in, please.
You're okay. So, wow, Khadijah. Thank you for the for the history lesson. I will say this. I think that sometimes we forget that we as in people in general, not just Black people, but we have our own biases. Yeah. And we bring that into everything that we do. So schools are no different. Schools are microcosms of the world. And so if people feel a certain way outside of their job, they're going to bring that in. If students feel a certain way outside of school, they're going to bring that in. So I think it takes a lot more than just let's change the curriculum and add some Black inventors or something like that. Let's add something about our culture in there. It's more than that. It is significantly more than that. I think people need to acknowledge their biases, first identify them, acknowledge them so that they can be aware of when they're coming out. I mean, I'm a firm believer of that. At my school, I make it a point to let people know that because that's just who we are. We're coming in. If we're watching those movies that says that Black boys, or that shows that Black boys or Black men are brutes, then that's going to stick in our head. Right? So we have to acknowledge that and then change that for ourselves first. So that's my little tidbit. I do think when it comes to schools, I think that there's not enough teachable moments or moments where people are being taught. There are teachable moments, but teachers or staff are taking a different approach. They're not taking the restorative approach. And so I think that we definitely have to work on what our purpose is when it comes to being educators. And if our purpose is, okay, we just got a job, then that's not the job you should be in. We say that often, but that's what I think. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to segue into this next question. But before I do that, I'm going to bring in a question from the audience because I don't want to lose them. Brother Nasheed asks, our schools, our schools, the way the system indoctrinated us into this system, if so, is that the push to get folks back in school because we're waking out of our slumber? So let me read that again. Our schools, the way that our schools are indoctrinating us into the system, is that the push to get folks back into school because we're waking out of our slumbers? I may need some more clarification, Brother Nasheed, if possible. So I'll come back to that question. If you could clarify.
Yeah, I think he's asking if the push to get students back in school is because maybe parents are waking up to the way the system works. I think
come back in school.
Yeah, why they're saying go back to school, go back to in person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that I don't think so. I know that the push to get students back into school has in large part is because of economics. It's about the systems that pay for
equity piece,
other systems, right? Mm-hmm. I think it has to do with which party is saying what, right? So our political system is determining a lot of what we do in our day-to-day, and our political system is divided by those who are pro-business and those who are, pro-citizen, pseudo. So I think that the push to get students back into school is a push to get economic stability. I think that there's a huge awareness going on right now with everything. I think that this virus, alhamdulillah, I think that the one thing that it has taught a lot of people is what is important and what is not, right? Mm-hmm. And how we can survive and what we actually survive on, right? So we thought that this system, the way it works, like for instance, I am learning that calendars and time, right, 100%. Are such a big deal. I'm one of those people that was always putting stuff in my calendar and moving according to my calendar and my clock. And I realized that that's not a big deal. That's not what is important. And so I think that there's a huge awakening going on right now. And I hope that what comes out of this awakening is an understanding of how strong and important that our culture is in this country, right? Mm-hmm. Understanding that and taking ownership for our place in this country, right? Mm-hmm. For the fact that if it wasn't for us, this country would not have been established, right? Our work and our blood is in the soil of this country. And the reason why it's considered, quote unquote, one of the best or the best country in the world is because of the work that we put in for 300 years. So understanding the power of our people is one awakening that I hope that comes out of this, right? Because that is the one thing that has worked, is the system has told us that we are worthless, that we are not worth anything. And the system has told us, and it's not just white people that believe that our boys are dangerous. It's us, right? In the raising of our sons, when we tell them, when you go outside, be quiet, walk like this, do this, we believe it too. We protect our sons. We call it protection, but what we are reiterating is this bias that you are by yourself dangerous to this society, right? And imagine the kind of implication that has on the psyche of a boy when they're told, when you walk out of the door, be like this, don't ask too many questions, don't touch this, don't do this. Imagine what that does to the psyche, right?
It creates a paranoia.
Right. It creates a paranoia. It creates a lack of safety in any environment. So our boys don't feel safe in any environment, right? So when people are asked to be authentic, that is not a privilege that our Black boys have. They don't have the privilege to be authentic in any space, because at any time they will go to prison or be snuffed out. And that is a fact. Right? It is not something that is made up. It is a fact. And I was one of those people that thought, because I was born in New York, but I was raised in Detroit, Michigan, in one of the worst neighborhoods in the state. I was raised in Detroit and Highland Park. And I moved my kids away from there thinking that I wanted them to have better opportunities, a better life, right? But what I brought them into was an environment that hates them overtly. Right? Yeah. Because they're Muslim and because they're Black. I cannot tell you the type of experience that my children have in what is known as one of the best schools in the county, right? The experience of my son having to quiet himself down and hang out with a certain type of student because he can't be too Black. And also understanding that even his Black peers are looking at him and saying, you have to act this way to be authentically Black. So I remember having a conversation with him where he was like, Mommy, and he was brought to tears. He said, Mommy, there's nowhere I can act like myself. Because if I'm acting like this, I'm acting white. If I'm acting like this, I'm not Black enough. So there's the fact that our boys aren't safe in any single environment, in any space in this country, is something that we need to definitely be aware of. And once you're aware of it, start have those conversations where you start to look at your own biases, like Medina said, look at your own biases and look at the way that you have promoted Blackness on your sons and promoted Blackness in this country, your own Blackness and your son's Blackness, and start to evaluate where that came from. What is that foundation? What is it built on? Is it built on something that is stereotypical, or is it built on a tangible cultural norm? And I think that that's the thing that we have to see now, is awaken to see what our cultural norms are and how to teach our sons to be authentic in any space without fear. And then start to tear down the structures, right? Because I'm one of those people at work, they call me a soldier, and they say, Khadijah, you're always on your soapbox. Tear down the systems, because you can't create equity. You cannot create equality if the system was built against that in the first place. You have to tear the system down. So when I started teaching in the school and I started to see these injustices and I started to see these Black boys being funneled into special ed programs and I started to see the way they treated them, I could have just stayed within my classroom. I could have just seen it as just a classroom thing. But then once I got into the county, I started seeing it as a county thing. It's broader than that. Wait, hold on, this is all over the county. Then I started to see it as a state thing. Wait, so I need to get into the state level. right? And once I get into the state level, starting the national level, and it's a lot of work. But the end game is tear the system down, right?
Start from not for us. It's not for us.
For us. So position yourself in places where they have to see you, right? Where they have to see you and where they have to hear you. And whatever that place is, wherever that space is, it takes sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice things. But it's important to know that you can't work within the system. The system has to go. The system has to be torn down. The system has to change for there to be equity and for there to be spaces where our boys feel safe.
Absolutely, 100%. Well said. And thank you, Khadijah, because that was right on point. That was right on point, because I think sometimes we look for these sort of minute sort of solution-based, we suggest these solution-based strategies and do this and add more history in and teach our kids that and add more. And it's really like we have to look at it as the infrastructure that it is. What is this infrastructure? What was this infrastructure, as you mentioned, founded on? How is it implemented? And it is very intentional. And I think as Black people, we have to really understand and look at all of these systems, these structural barriers, and all these things that we're facing now. They're very intentional. They're very strategic, right? The outcome has been thought about, prior, years and years prior. So it's really important. I want to segue into another question. We have a lot of comments, and Medina, I'm going to pull you in a minute, but I think this is important. This is one of the things I'm very passionate about, which is this idea of these zero tolerance policies. These that criminalize minor infractions of school rules. We know all about them. All three of us, we know about them. Some of us enforce it. You know what I mean? I ain't gonna throw no names out there. But we understand we have cops in our Black schools. We start the criminalization of our Black children, especially our Black boys, from the time they enter into that building. I'm talking about 4 years old, when that innocence is there. They're already criminal. They're already seeing a cop come get them and pull them out of the classroom. I witnessed it my own self right before COVID. So many cases of these young 5-year-olds being pulled and restrained by cops, for minor infractions or just being misunderstood on the basis of their trauma. So we know that our Black boys are especially vulnerable to discriminatory policies, how we discipline. You mentioned the suspension, expulsion. Can we talk a little bit about that and what the impact is on our young Black boys specifically with this culture of criminalizing them with these discipline, zero tolerance policies that we have, that we love so much as school administrators? Go on.
I put my head down as an administrator. You're right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Khadijah.
Well, I think that zero tolerance is kind of fading away, and we've gotten into more of restorative practices, PBI. And I think also that is a joke also, right? I think that there's this, it is. I mean, in the sense that it's a system built to pacify, right? It's this white savior mentality, right? I'm going to come and save poor Black boys by making their life so wonderful in school, giving them candy and not telling them the consequences of real life, right? So, for instance, in the school that I was in, we had PBIS, and it was very much about reward systems. You reward them for doing things that they're supposed to do. So you walk on the yellow line, good, get a point. You washed your hands after you went to the bathroom, you get a point. You stayed quiet the whole day, good, you get a point. Very little emphasis on actually restoring the children. So like when a kid, and I was the teacher that got all of the behaviors. So I would go from 24 students to 32 students because I would get additional behaviors throughout the year. And so there was very little emphasis on figuring out what the problem was and restoring the child, teaching them coping mechanisms, teaching them how to deal with their issues that were hindering their education. And it was more so of let's planned ignoring. Have you all ever heard of planned ignoring?
Yeah, that's a big strategy in special education.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So that was my favorite. Don't respond to them. Ignore them completely, so that they understand that their behavior will not get the reward of your attention. And it was interesting to me because it was most often didn't work. And I would look and I would say, okay, you want me to ignore this student and their cry for help because that's what they want. They want your attention, right? They want you to notice them, right? Again, once again, feeding off of these stereotypes, all they want is attention. And so when I say that it's a joke, or the system itself isn't built to help, it's not built to identify, it's not built to fix any issues. It's built to pacify while they're in here, to teach them how to do exactly what you're supposed to do as planned. So when I say exactly what you're supposed to do in a prison system, right? You get up at a certain time, you eat at a certain time, you do work at a certain time, you work out at a certain time, right? In the school system, right? And PBIS also was used in prisons. When we were trained for PBIS, and I quote, this is what the trainer said. This came directly from the penal system. This was used in prison systems, PBIS, okay? So understand the implication of a system of behavior management that comes from the penal system, right? So you have all of these people in the penal system. You have a way to control major behaviors, right? And that's what PBIS does. So when I heard that, I started to look up what PBIS was, research it. I wanted to know the ins and outs of it, right? The historical implications, what it was. Basically what it is to train them how to code switch, how to assimilate into a system, right? That's already established to send them into a prison system, because you didn't fix the system. You didn't change the way you penalize. You didn't change the way you react to behaviors. You just trained them to act differently within the system, right? So that's why it doesn't work. And it's actually counterproductive to our Black and brown boys, because it's when you ignore the core problem, right? You're teaching them that as long as you behave like this in this environment, you'll be fine. But it's not teaching them how to behave, period, right? So I remember looking at, it was one student that came to me and he was homeless. He had been in and out of foster care, severely abused, extreme behavior. As soon as you gave him a paper, he'd flip a table. You didn't have to do nothing. Smile at him wrong. The boy was after me with some scissors, okay? And I remember they put him in my room around February, and they told me nothing about him. No history, no background, nothing. We just know Miss Abdullah works really well with students. Let's put her in a room. Let's put him in a room. So immediately they told me, try this strategy, try that strategy, try this strategy. Okay. And this boy didn't care about any of it. Wasn't having any of it. So tried all of the PBIS stuff, didn't work. He was still acting up. One teacher came to me and said, well, just collect the data on him, right? We'll get him, because there's tiers, tier 2, tier 3, collect the data. Eventually he'll go into an EBD classroom. That's what she told me. So don't worry. It's only about 12 weeks you'll have to deal with him. Eventually he'll get tested and he'll qualify for EBD. So basically what you're saying is, let him behave the way he wants to. Let him play in the corner. No education at all. He was not getting taught at all. We're not going to even try to teach him at all, because eventually we're just going to test him into special ed. That was the solution, right? So again, we're not trying to address what the trauma is. We're not trying to address the fact that this boy has seen and been through severe, extreme trauma and extreme abuse. We're not looking at that. We're not going to address that at all. Just collect the data so we can send them through the system. Mm-hmm. So to me, we've moved from one system that didn't work, right? Which is, zero
tolerance policies.
Zero tolerance, to another system that completely works. Because zero tolerance, when PBIS and restorative practices came into play, it's because of the data that was showing that Black and brown boys were being penalized much more than their white counterparts. So schools decided that to create equity, we would bring in restorative practices, PBIS, because these boys are being penalized. So schools are now being told that you can't suspend. If you do suspend these kids, especially in the elementary level, a certain amount, then you could be penalized as far as your data and your school score. So they don't want to suspend them, but they found a different way to not address the issues that Black and brown boys are facing in the school system. So yeah, we've moved away from zero tolerance to something else that just doesn't work. Because again, once again, the system is not built to work for or work to help Black and brown boys. It's not built for that.
Powerful. Medina, I want to bring you in. Medina, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, just hearing that story, not being violent, but it makes me want to shake whoever that is that said they just need to be tested. There's always a reason why there's behaviors, always. And when I work with my students, that is what I stand by. There's a reason why that kid doesn't want to talk to you or that kid is being smart with you. There's a reason why they'll flip the desk. There's a reason why they walk out the classroom because you just disrespected them. There's a reason why they react the way that they react. And until we as educators decide, wait, what just happened? Okay.
I'm just putting up a question, but we're listening to you. Sorry.
That's okay. There's a reason why our kids and our Black boys specifically, why they are acting in a way that people perceive as defiant, or people perceive as just not being, accepting. I've had teachers tell me that the Black boy who is Black young man, let me not call them boys, but the young man who look at them a certain way because they're not feeling them. They don't want to hear them.
Right.
They're scared of them. They're scared that they might hit them one day. They might flip the table. And I think I almost cracked, and I should not have in a professional setting, but I definitely had to say that actually makes me sad that is the mentality that you have, because this young man is not interested in the foolishness that you're spewing.
Right.
Okay. Sorry. But
is it okay, ladies, if I break? Because we're getting a little behind with the comments. I just want to bring it in really, really quickly, if that's okay. So I'm gonna just put it up to the screen. Just not gonna do that. Okay. So I work with 0 to 5 year olds in multicultural setting, and my team had a hard time and would easily label the Black kids when the other kids were doing the same thing. I would continuously redirect them in their usage of words towards them because it was as if they are already criminalized him, and he was barely 3 years old. So that is very, we see that, really prevalent in our educational system.
Yeah.
And
that's, I don't know if you all have ever heard of the term democracy of words, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those who hold the power, right, hold the understanding, right? So they create the narrative. So a lot of times the way that we word or the way that we write out what these boys are doing, right? One kid can be difficult while the other boy can be violent, right? Yeah. We use words, right? The words that we label these children with is how they're defined because the data follows them, right? It's written in their documentation that follows them to whatever school they go to. So when we look at, so a kid comes to your school and you want to know what they were doing at their old school, what was going on, and you look at the way that words are used against Black boys over other boys, right? I remember many times seeing words like difficulty, some issues, whereas words like violent, disruptive, insubordinate were often widely used for Black boys, right? And it was interesting to me because oftentimes, like Medina said earlier, the bias determines how you interpret the action, right? So a boy can be walking down the hall a certain way, and this happened. I always use my personal experiences. We had hat day at our school, and a boy walked in, and he had his hat to the back, right? Like many teachers had, many other students had, but he had to the back. And it was a student that had been a problem child before. And then I was talking to a group of teachers in the hallway, and he passed by, and the teacher turned up her nose and said, well, if you act like a thug, that's exactly what you're going to be. You're going to be a thug. And I said to her, as another teacher walked past with the exact same, the hat on exactly the same way, like that teacher. And she looked at me in shock, like, wait a minute. And that was a teachable moment, because I said to her, I said, in that moment, the direction of his hat was thuggish for him. But this white teacher, she's just participating in hat day. I said, do you see how that is problematic. She didn't answer, but that's what I mean. Like, he wasn't doing anything out of the norm. He wasn't misbehaving, but because his hat was in the wrong direction, or in the direction of a stereotypical thug, that's exactly what he was to her. So in that moment, it didn't matter what he did. It doesn't matter who he was. She was going to dismiss him because he was a black boy with his hat turned to the back. He was automatically a thug. And that's the danger of the democracy of words, right? When you say these things and you make them a reality. And so when these teachers are labeling these students in such a way that determines how people perceive them, how people see them. And that's exactly what our society has done to black men and black boys historically. Historically, they have been dangerous thugs who are here to steal from you and harm you in any way. And everything they do is seen as violent or gang related, right? So again, the idea is that I go back to what I said before, the system is broken, right? In our classroom, we do classroom management, correct? We set up the system so that it works on its own. We don't, after the first quarter, we basically don't have to say anything. Everything works like a well-oiled machine if you do it right. And that's exactly how this system has worked generation after generation after generation. The system was set up like a well-oiled machine. It was set up to protect whiteness, right? And it was set up to exclude poor and black. Originally, it was poor, right? Because America was established so that everybody could be own land and could have generational wealth, right? Except for black people. You were not meant to have it. You're not going to have it. So the system was set up for rich, white, and Christian. So the system runs like a well-oiled machine. If you act against that, or if you are against that, then the system is going to penalize you. And that's what you see in the school systems. Boys are supposed to act like this, but automatically you're wrong if you're black. If you behave in cultural norms that are black, then you are automatically violent, gang-related, and you are automatically penalized. And that's just how the system is.
Well, Khadijah, I'm sorry, I wanted to segue into a very important point, and we're gonna get to this because I do think it's really important that, you know, I mean, as we dialogue this, that we are very solution oriented. So Janet brought up a very important point. So I'm hearing that the solution is to fix or change the system, but how do we get everyone involved on board? So looking sort of, I mean, we understand, I mean, that's a big, when we understand that the system is broken, but we want to really walk away with things we can do right now to make an impactful change. And like I said, we have a very blessed, if we look at it the right way, opportunity with this COVID piece, especially for us that are now having to take some ownership of educating our own children and taking a much deeper look into how they're being educated, because you can see it now that they're at home, hopefully, inshallah, that is the idea for at least more families than there were before. So what are some aspects, and how do we get everyone involved on board?
The biggest thing.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay. So I do think I was listening to what Khadijah was saying, and when she was saying that she, you know, said something to the teacher who was commenting on the student who had their hat to the back. I think that, you know, it's a cliche, but it's one person at a time. So if you are interacting with a teacher that says something that is derogatory, call them out, and don't call them out in a negative way. I pull a lot of teachers in my office and say, hey, that wasn't the right way, or maybe it was, but how could we have done this better? So I think that if you one person at a time can talk to one person at a time, then that will make a change. Maybe not a drastic one, but it's a start.
Khadijah?
I think that one thing you have to understand is that the school system works for you. Okay, your child.
A lot of people don't know that, Khadijah.
Is not. Your child is not privileged to go to the school. The school system works for you. You pay property taxes so the school can run the way it does. So when you understand that reality, right? When you walk into a system, when you walk into the school, know that they're working for you. A lot of times, and this is what I've experienced in working with Title I schools and schools that are underprivileged, right? There's no advocates. The reason why this goes on is because there's no advocacy. They're not scared of the parents. The reason why it doesn't happen in East Cobb or in Roswell, in Athens, is because they're scared. Yeah, in Georgia, in the more affluent parts of Georgia, right? Is because they're not scared. Because they're scared of the parents. The parents are going to pitch a fit. Understand your power as a parent in the school system. They work for you. When they tell you, and I have sat in so many meetings where parents have been told, well, those are the rules. Call them on it. Ask them to present the rules to you. Show it to me. Where does it say that? When they hand you that parent contract in the beginning of the year, read it, know it. Because they will start, I've seen teachers add stuff to those parent contracts that are in there. They'll say, no, it says it in the parent contract. Where? Show it to me. Call them out on it. So when I say you can't fix the system, you got to break it down. Push against it, right? The system is not here to support you. You have to make it do so, right? So when you go in and they say to you, we've collected data on your child, and we're suggesting this, ask them for every data point.
Because a lot of times data points won't be there.
Ask them for the rules in collecting data. Ask them for the strategies and the research behind the strategies. Push against it. Because until the parents start to advocate, until you start to understand the power you have in the school system, these things will continue to go on. These little boys will still be funneled. I can't tell you how many times I saw parents come in and I'm wondering, I can't say this to them because as a teacher, I can only say so much. Why are you letting this happen? Why are you allowing this? And there's 100% trust in the education system from parents, especially parents who are afraid that they are going to call the social services.
Yep.
This is a real fear, and they use it. Our
Latino brothers and sisters.
The teachers will pick up the phone and report, and those parents are deathly afraid of being reported. Mm-hmm. But even then, understand you have rights. Ask them, why did you report it? What evidence did you have? Now, I can tell you, they tell me all the time that if I report something, it's anonymous. That's a lie, because I've had parents come directly to my classroom. How come you called? And call me at 8 p.m. at night asking me, why did I call the people on them? So there's a fear that stops parents, especially in poor areas, because, and when I was doing research for my master's, it's called economic segregation. And the one thing that keeps people fearful in areas where there's low economics is the school's ability to call police and social services on them, and the fear that social services will take their children away, or their children will be arrested, or they will be arrested, that reports will be made. Understand your rights. And that's one thing that in the schools that I taught in, and when I go and do trainings, that is one thing that you don't see is parent advocacy. Is parents standing up and saying and calling the school on everything they do. Yeah. You have a power that
unless it's a private school.
Well, yeah, that's privilege, though. You're not talking about that. Yeah,
your money has power too. Your money has power too.
Yeah, I mean that's privilege in itself. The fact that you're in a private school. I wanted to bring in another question because we need to wrap up some really important points, and we haven't even segued it into adulthood, which we will. But sisters, how important is neighborhood drama playing out inside the schools?
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, that schools are a microcosm of the world. So they're just like the little world, brought into this these four walls and this roof. So I think the environmental drama and community drama comes into the school.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna say this last point, and then I have another question for you guys. While I see there's benefit in one person at a time method, we absolutely have to make changes at the systemic level. One of the reasons why systemic issues racism has prevailed for so long is we continue with the low-level changes. We need Black teachers, Black admin, Black superintendents, especially Black men for these boys. Absolutely. 100%. We agree 100%. You're right. It has to happen. And like you said, we got to break through the system. We at a point now, it's like, we not over here asking nobody for nothing. We done with that. We did that. We already did that. We have to actually, like Khadijah spoke to the fact of like using our own power, and also using the system that they created against them. Because they, their strategies, like I said, as a people, I think it's really important that we understand, like I said, we look at everything that's been done as strategic, but you also understand and analyze their strategies, because their strategies actually can be used against them. And so let me ask this question, and this is for both you ladies. I think this is important. One of the things about the Dope Muslim Woman podcast that I'm really adamant about and do a lot of episodes about is the relationship between the Black man and the Black woman, and the Black Muslim man and the Black Muslim woman, right? Mm-hmm. So as we address our issues, as we deal with spirituality, as we deal with us growing Islamically and trying to handle marriages and families and raising children, we seem to always come around to this sort of gross misunderstanding that we often have between Black men and Black women. So I wanted to just speak, and of course you guys are ladies, you can't speak on behalf of men, but I did want to understand, what does some of this unaddressed trauma, when we talk about what happens in the school system and in the school to prison pipeline, what does it look like in our relationships? How does it show up? What is sometimes the impact into adulthood, when we think about how our Black boys are sort of criminalized as their children, and they're funneled into special education, and a lot of times funneled into the criminal justice system? How does it impact our family life?
I think the trauma that people and that Black boys experience is going to carry them, or is going to go with them, I should say. I don't think that there is really a distinction between like being in some type of relationship and going through trauma. I think it's all going to mesh together. So if a young man is feeling, I don't know, feeling isolated, feeling criminalized, feeling attacked, I think the moment in a relationship, the moment someone says something or their spouse says something, they're going to react the same way that they would react when they were in school, unless they've learned coping skills and learned how to work through that. Trauma doesn't go away unless you work through it. And unless it's understood by the person, in a relationship, when it's understood by your spouse that you've gone through this and you all have worked through it together, great. But if you have not done that because you don't know how, that doesn't automatically change just because you're in a relationship.
Absolutely. 100%. Thank you. Khadijah, do you have any insight on that?
And I've been studying trauma as it relates to African Americans and as it relates to generational trauma, right? So one, understand that trauma is a part of the African American culture. Mm-hmm. Okay, it is not adjacent to, it is part of the African American culture. And how trauma operates, trauma is passed down generation to generation. Trauma can impact a child in vitro, right, inside of the womb. So mothers can carry their trauma, and it impacts the child that they're carrying. And also that trauma impacts the way we interact in every situation in our lives, right? It impacts the way we attack certain situations, the way we react to certain situations, our relationship bonds, the way we bond with our children, the way we bond with our spouses, the way we react to certain situations like driving, going to the store. All of that is impacted by trauma. And a perfect example of that is moments where you are in hyper awareness of your presence in a certain situation, right? So as a Muslim woman, and the only Muslim woman in a lot of situations, I am very aware of my Muslimness, right? I'm very aware that the first thing they're going to see is me as a Muslim. So my natural reaction is to make jokes and to be as lively as possible so that they're less threatened. That is a natural reaction to every environment that I go into, because I understand that my presence to certain people is a threat. That's how trauma works, right? And the interactions that I've had because of my Islam is how I relate to my environments. So to say that, one, like Medina said, doesn't turn off, right? Your trauma is how you interact with your everyday world, right? And it's the thing about trauma is most people aren't even aware of their own trauma. They're not even aware of it, right? So I have been married twice.
I got your alarm on. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know what it is. I've been married twice.
You get the phone. Golly.
I try. So I've been married twice. I have 4 children, 2 by a previous marriage and 2 by the marriage that I'm in right now.
It's not going off?
It's I don't even know what it is. I'm gonna turn my phone off.
Okay.
Hold on. Yes, I've turned my phone off.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, no. Okay, there.
You got Android? No, let me stop. No.
Don't even go into it, Sabria. Don't even do it. So I got married very young, not understanding how my own trauma had impacted the way that I went into a marriage. So my expectations, what I understood my role as a woman was, what I understood my role as a wife was based on my trauma. It was not based on something that would work, something that was functional. It was based on my trauma. And I had no idea that I was operating within my own trauma, right? Within my own inability or lack of tools because of my trauma. So I see, when I do my presentations, I say this: everybody has a toolbox, right? Everybody is put on this earth and they're given toolboxes. Those toolboxes come from nature and they come from nurture. Naturally, we already know how to walk, how to talk. I mean, we learn how to walk and talk, but those are skills that regardless of if we were in a traumatic situation or not, we would learn how to do, right? It's natural reactions. And then we have things like relationships, how to interact with relationships, how we view ourselves, how we see ourselves in relationships, how we see ourselves in the greater world, how we see ourselves as women and how we see ourselves as men. Cultural norms. A lot of the cultural norms that we as African Americans have adopted and operated within are based on trauma, right? They're based on traumatic experiences from our parents that then taught their children, right? And they juxtapose those traumatic experiences onto us. So for instance, a parent who grew up during the civil rights movement will often, right, juxtapose his or her feelings about white people onto their children without their children having any experiences with that race. All of a sudden, they have a belief about the race based on the experiences or the trauma that has been juxtaposed onto them. A parent that has been through any type of abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, will then teach their children about dangers based on that abuse, right? So, for instance, women often say this, and I've heard this in many different conversations: men ain't nothing, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Men are going to abuse you. Men are naturally going to do this. They are naturally going to do that. That's just their animal reactions, right? This is what we were taught as women. And as women, understanding that our role is to do extra to make sure that your spouse is happy and doesn't do these things that their nature tells them to do. That is all trauma. That is all based on trauma, right? As an African American community, we were taught from the days of slaves being put on the block that Black men weren't going to stay. They weren't going to stay.
They're temporary.
They're temporary, right?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Either be killed or be sold. So automatically, our natural reaction was to become everything. Everything. We had to learn how to survive without them. And our mechanisms and our genetic markings we are still operating within that construct. We don't need a man, right? We can do it on our own. Independent woman. There's songs about it, right? But then when you talk about what it is to depend on a man, then that is something else, right? It's subservient, right? It's let him do whatever he wants to do, and you say yes, sir, no, sir, and do exactly what you're supposed to do. Serve him, be subservient. So again, all of that, both sides are based on our traumatic experiences. How many of us have heard he gets the bigger piece of chicken because he got to go back out in the world, make his plate, because as a man, he has to survive in the world. And the one thing he can come home to is a big piece of chicken and a plate brought to him because he already deals with all that out in the world. That is our trauma. So we operate in our relationships.
And then like that.
But that's also not true, right? That's also a stereotype and stigma that we have been taught, right? So again, and then also, I was reading an article, and I don't agree completely with this article, but it's very controversial. It says that the single mother has ruined the Black man, right? And I don't agree with this article, but it brought up a good question, because I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, absolutely not, and dismiss it. I want to know where it came from. So I always ask questions. Where did this come from? The interaction, right, between a mother and her daughter and a mother and her son, culturally, completely different, right? A mother coddles her son, right, while teaching her daughter to be strong.
Yes.
Where did that come from?
Yes.
Right? It came from the trauma. And I'm reading a book right now, which is, so far, has been really good. It's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding that the 300 years it took us to be legitimate citizens, right? 300 plus years. That during that time, it was branded on us, our family structure, the way we interact with each other, and our worth in this society. And on top of that, the campaign that is still going on to teach us that we are less than, right? And that our men don't matter. Our men are violent. They are worthless, right? They're going to do this. They're going to do that. Because it's not just white society that believes the stigmas and the stereotypes. We all do, as Americans, as a people, believe that Black men are innately dangerous and worthless. So that belief teaches us how to operate, right, with them. So we have set up systems within our own family structure that perpetuates this belief, teaches our sons, teaches our daughters this, right? And then that is brought into the school. So when you first told me about the title of this podcast, I was like, that is such an important title, because how many Black families teach their boys that boys don't cry? Suck it up.
Everybody.
Being a man is you can't be a man and show your feelings.
Yep.
You have feelings. You have feelings.
Right.
Why would you do? And I'm telling you, I was raised where I didn't have feelings. I had a conversation with my daughter. It was very important. She said, "Mommy, you're unemotional." I was taught to be unemotional, right? You're too emotional. It's too much. Why? It's too much.
Yeah.
Stop being so sensitive. Stop being so soft, right? How many of you have heard, stop being a girl, acting like a girl. Stop acting like a girl, right? It's like there's this whole stigma that emotions are against your genetic makeup. But what I have learned as a teacher is that boys are more sensitive than girls. Girls are more expressive. Boys are more sensitive.
Yep.
Boys are more insecure.
Yep.
Right? Boys are easily triggered. That's a marker for sensitivity. When you are easily triggered, the boys are easy. I mean, you could say as soon as you say, "What's wrong with your shoes?"
Yeah.
Why is your shirt like that? I don't like your shirt. The boys are ready to fight. Say something about some boy's mama. Say something about their mama, and that's it. Girls, on the other hand, are more emotionally expressive, but they're not as easily triggered. So boys are more emotional, but they've been taught to suppress those emotions. Because when you go out in society, and this comes from the slave days, when you go out in society, you have to be strong. Because they're going to physically try to break your back, but you have to make sure they don't break your spirit. And so we still carry those traumatic markers with us every day, and it's carried with us in the way we react in our relationships. Women are taught to fight against men.
Yes.
Automatically. Yes. We're taught to battle them.
We
right?
are.
Don't tell me how to be a woman. Don't tell me I can't do this. Don't tell me I can't do that. Very often there's a battle, right? A power battle. Who's the alpha in this situation? And we've been taught there has to be an alpha, which is a white construct. There has to be an alpha. Somebody has to be in charge, right? Somebody has to be in charge of you, right? And if a woman is assertive, then she must be, oh, well, you know, who wears the pants in the family? And I think that's the issue that causes the trauma that comes into the schools, because the boys aren't taught how to express their emotions, how to communicate their emotions. The men aren't taught how to express and communicate their emotions. The women aren't taught how to express and communicate their emotions. How many times have you sat down and wondered if you should have this hard conversation? You don't want to deal with the reaction, or you don't want to deal with what's going to happen once you reveal this truth. And that's not something we're taught to do. And the boys, when they come into our classroom, are taught to be strong. If you cry, I mean, I can't tell you how many times my boys would cover their head when they start crying. Girls are very openly cry. Boys will go into the corner, don't look at them. They get more mad if you see them crying. This idea that they're not supposed to cry, right? That you're weak if you're crying. And I'm not saying go against everything that is culturally true in your household. I'm saying teach the boys when it's appropriate, how to express their emotions. Listen to them, because that is not something that's being done. Culturally, we suppress emotions. As African Americans, we are taught to suppress it, but majority Black and Black men and Black boys are told to suppress it more than women. They're not allowed to express it. They're not allowed to feel it. It's a weakness.
Absolutely. Powerful. You want to go ahead, Medina?
I was just going to say, I also think with what Khadijah was saying about the different, not roles, but I guess roles of men and women and how they're battling, that comes into a relationship.
Yeah.
So when you're battling
relationships, yeah,
who has the power, that's going to affect your relationship.
Yeah.
When our young men are dealing with things out in the world, and then they come home and they have, well, they're not young men, but our men are dealing with things in the world, and then they come home and they have to still battle. That's going to affect the relationship.
Right.
And the psyche.
But
so
do our men know that they can come and express what the issue actually is? You can go out there and deal with the issues, but you come in and you have to put on this front and put on this facade, because as a man, you have to be the strong one. You are the matriarch. You are the one that are the patriarch. You are the one that is the head of this table. So you've got to be strong. And I think that is the issue. And then the women, when they see this, and then speaking for myself also, when we see this, right, we see it as a personal attack on us, right? I don't know what's wrong with them, but you're not going to act like that in here.
Yeah, there you go.
You ain't going to do that up in here. Not with my children, not in my, you know what I mean? And it's the constant combativeness, because either side doesn't know how to express or to communicate their emotions, right? And then you have issues where people come from backgrounds of severe trauma, and that trauma defines how they see the opposite sex, right? There are men who have been through traumatic experiences with the women in their lives who absolutely hate women, who are married and resent women. And there are women who've been through traumatic experiences with men who absolutely resent men, even though they're married. So on the
whole relationship, hating men,
the conflict is happening is because there's the trauma in the background that's telling you, no matter what, he's a bad guy. No matter what he do, he's going to leave you eventually. And you start, I'll tell you how intricate trauma is. You see things that aren't actually there.
Yeah.
You see things that aren't actually present, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, everything points to this one thing. You start looking for validation for the feeling you already have, right? So if you feel this man is going to leave you and he's going to just break your heart, you're looking for things and determining them as proof to this reality. You create your own realities. Trauma changes the way your brain sees reality. Mm-hmm. That's how deep trauma is, right?
That's your lens. That's your lens. The trauma is your lens that you see everything through. And so you will start to, like you said, look for things.
Yeah.
That's all you can see until you are through it. So I would say that I'm going to challenge our women for a second.
Yes.
That's because that's what I do. But I challenge the women to try to like support our men a little bit more.
Absolutely.
As we have gone through trauma, I can say I have, and my husband has too. So if we have gone through trauma, work through it together.
Well, I would say also on top of that, Medina, learn what your trauma is, right?
Learn it,
and how it teaches you how to react. Yeah.
Accept it and understand where to place it in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all about that. If you do not acknowledge that something has happened to you, then you can't deal with it because you didn't even acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And I would say in my own personal life, I'm realizing how trauma has played a part in my own personal life and how it has shaped the way I react to my husband. Right. Mm-hmm. So my husband loves to go out to dinner, and he loves to go to restaurants. He went to restaurants far more than I did when I was a kid. I don't think I ever went to a restaurant until I was about 19 or 20 years old. But also restaurants are attached to very traumatic experiences for me because after 9/11, I had very negative experiences attached to public places. I did not realize that's what it was coming from. So every time my husband would say, let's go to a restaurant, why don't you pick someplace? I'd be like, I don't understand why you always want me to pick someplace. You know, it was constant. It was a back and forth, and it was always something else was the problem. It was never that I just didn't want to go out. It was, why are you pushing me to do this? I'm tired. You want me to get up? What are we going to do with the kids? And it was always something else. But come to find out, the root of all of that, and I resented him for asking me. I resented him for constantly trying to push me to go out and push me to get out. I'm a very much a recluse, and I would resent him and think, well, you just don't understand and like who I am. When in actuality, it was my trauma and my traumatic experiences that was causing social anxiety when I went out. So I had to really look into what was the problem. Was it actually him and what he was doing, or was it me, right, and my trauma reacting to him in a way that was combative? And so I had to look into it. And I think that the important part is having an honest conversation with ourselves, right? Because in my younger years, I had no idea the many facets of who I was as a woman, as a Muslim. And so I had to come to terms and come to truth, right? I had to come to truth about who I was. I didn't understand what I wanted from a relationship, what I wanted from a spouse. Everything that I wanted was based on what I was told I was supposed to have as a woman, right? As a mom, I was told that my role was this, and this is the things that I wanted. I can't want anything else. But there was an unrest within me, an unrest within myself, because I wanted so much more. And I think that we have to come to our own truth about ourselves first, and then come to a truth about how we interact in the relationships that we have, not just with our husbands, but also with our children. Yeah. Because I am now being faced with the reality of a teenager who is transitioning into an adult, right? And I you teach them and you kind of go through the motions, right? You do what's best, but you're going through the motions. You stop sometimes to think what's best, but in actuality, most of what I taught her, most of what I gave her was based on my own traumas, right? Based on my interactions with her were based on my own traumas. So also analyzing the relationship you have with your children, right? Analyzing the relationship you have with everyone that's close to you, right? And so, and having conversations with yourself to come to your own truth, and then having conversations with your spouse and allowing the growth within the relationship. Me and my husband have grown in different levels, right? So yeah. I'm at a place he may not be at right now, but giving him the respect and regard to know that and see that he is growing within his own, and I have to support that.
100%. And I know we have got to end. We went way over time, but thank you so much, Khadijah, Medina, powerful. I just want to acknowledge and honor this brother's comment, because I think it's vital and we want you to be heard. So especially our men, when they comment, it means a lot to the Don't Muslim podcast. But he said, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm not sure where to begin. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with men being too emotional. Most cultures promote the ideal man as being stoic and unflappable. So I do want to say, and we're not going to go into another lecture about this, but I do want to just say, brother, that no one spoke of men being too emotional. What was spoke to was the fact of being an ability to express the emotions in a healthy manner. So it doesn't mean having crying fits and up there stare. No one, I don't think Khadijah nor Medina mentioned that, but the aspect of suppressing emotions is not healthy. And we know if we are Muslims, we look at the model. Our model is always Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was a very emotionally intelligent human being. There's, you can look that up and look at how he actually expressed, acknowledged emotions, how he cried when he was sad, and how he grieved when it was time to grieve. So I think that what they're speaking of, and it's not about what the cultures are doing or anything like that. We know what our model is, and the fact of the matter is the way that our culture, due to our trauma and the things that happen to us as African Americans, we move really far away from that model, which was established by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we know is a divine model that we need to be following and encouraging our boys to be on. So I want to just say that because I don't want that to be misunderstood and our sisters' words to be misunderstood. So Jazakallah khairan. All right, so I want to just say this because we have to end, but I want to just take a moment because you guys said so much, and honestly, like I have moments and I'm not being where I was very emotional because I think there was so much power in the words, and there was a lot to unpack, like the brother said. So I'm going to start with my co-host sister, Medina. Thank you so much. I honor you and respect you for the work that you do, which is why I asked you to be here. Your work you do revolutionary work in those schools when you counsel, you deal with the social, emotional well-being of these children. So I honor and respect you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for using your voice. I appreciate you and I honor you. Khadijah, like I said, from the bottom of my heart, you spoke to my spirit and my soul, and I'm sure you did to the audience as well. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for being so radical about it. Thank you for looking deep into these issues and radically loving and our young Black children every day, our children that have experienced pain and trauma. And I know personally the work that you do. This sister lives this work out day and that they both do. I want to just thank you. Thank you for speaking to me. That last part that you spoke to hit me to my core. And so especially, as we try to really be introspective and think of how we're showing up and how this all relates to us on an individual level. I don't have sons, but, I radically love on boys. Like that's my whole career is full of boys, but just like many of you guys. But it's still individually. So I thank you. I honor you. Thank you so much, Khadijah. Thank you to my audience member. You were amazing. Thank you for your comments. We love you. We honor you. Any last words, ladies, before we jump off of here? Any last words? Okay, sorry.
No, thank you for inviting me. I feel privileged that you invited me on. I am privileged to speak to your audience. I love what you're doing. I am in awe of you as a person. I think that you are the type of person that I try to model myself after. My movements and things like that are definitely modeled after some of your movements. So I'm privileged to be a part of your show. I will say that I would love to and challenge a conversation between Muslim men and Muslim women, an open conversation, an open forum where we talk about the things that we so quickly dismiss and misunderstand. I think that there's a conversation that needs to happen that is so important to our family structure, especially as Muslims in this country. And I challenge the Muslim brothers and sisters to come together and have that conversation. I'm ready to have that conversation. It's what I've been doing. I'm a yeller. I want to yell to the world that you are a powerful people. We are set up in a place and a system where we have fought for most of our lives, and we keep fighting, and understand the strength that it takes to fight for over 300 years, for over 400 years to fight, and we are strong. And so I admire my people for their strength, and I say keep fighting, and I'm going to be fighting with you.
I mean, beautifully said. And Khadijah just announced our final episodes, but season 2 is wrapping up, and our final segue is the journey called The Journey to Understanding. We're nowhere in the mini series The Journey, but we're ending, and I was talking to Medina about this a little earlier, but we're ending this series with The Journey to Understanding, where we are going to have that open forum, and we're going to give the men the floor, and then we're going to give the women the floor, and we're going to have some culminating dialogue between the two. And so look forward to that. You're going to see that coming down the pipes very soon. But thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I love you guys radically. Khadijah and Medina, you are a part of my tribe, and I appreciate you and honor you. So thank you for being here.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Okay, Jazakallah khairan. All right, audience. So we're going to be releasing our next podcast episode. I don't have an official date. I will say that our audio podcast from Halima Munoz, which is called The Power of the Latina Muslim Woman, and she gave a very powerful episode, is going to be coming in a day or two, and it is an audio podcast. So please tune into that, called The Power of the Latina Muslim Woman, and we're going to have those final culminating episodes of season 2, which is The Journey to Understanding, where we are really culminating that understanding between the Black Muslim man and the Black Muslim woman. So until then, we love you, we honor you, take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.